Simon with me today. Robin, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, you got where are you today? See this great backdrop you have there.
Here in Austin, Texas. So it's been sunny and cold and back and forth as it usually is this time of year, but a pretty nice day down here in Texas today.
I'm in New York, and we had like 2 feet of snow in 24 hours. So glad you got to avoid a lot of that. Or hey guys, appreciate you guys listening to the show today on the live broadcast. Robin, I've known Robin for a number of years now. He is one of the biggest experts on DSCRs for short-term rental. So I wanted to get Robin on the show today to talk more about that, educate you guys on the STR loan process and how you can use DSCR loans to continue to either start or expand your portfolio. But Robin, I'm taking too much thunder from you. Do you want to give a chance to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, that was great. And I'll take that intro for sure. So on the DSCR loans front, this is the first week since or the first podcast appearance since I've published what's called the book on DSCR loans, which is a large book, 715 pages of kind of everything you'd ever want to know, and then probably a lot more on top of that about DSCR loans. It's available on Amazon.com, and I'm sure we can share a link, but it's literally just called The Book on DSCR Loans. So I've been involved in the DSCR lending industry for a few years at a couple different companies. I've been out of the lending industry for about a year over most of 2025, and in that time, based on my experience, I was able to kind of write this book. I also spent the last year purchasing, three short-term rentals, including using DSCR loans for those, and then converting a short-term primary to a shorter-term rental, or to a medium-term rental, actually. And that's financed with other loan products. So
Yes.
been able to kind of write that book, but also see it from the other side, including working through the STR loophole and the tax implications, being a borrower, being signing up and investing in STRs too, which has really opened my eyes from that side of the process as well.
No, it's good to be on both sides of the coin. I think that's a really helpful perspective that you can bring to the table. But let's start with some basics, just so that for folks, and we'll have a link to this. We'll have a link to the book. I reviewed it. It's a great book. Everyone, if you're interested in DSCRs, might not get through this entire 700 pages, but there's a bunch of good chapters in there that's really helpful. But why don't we give a little preview of that here today, Robin? So what does DSCR stand for? First off.
So DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. It's a metric. So DSCR loans are just named after that metric.
Okay.
It can be a
And
little confusing because it's mostly named that because most mortgage loans, especially if you've used conventional loans or just for your own residence or traditional mortgage for a short-term rental, the one of the main qualifying metrics is DTI, or debt to income, where they look at your personal income. So one of the big differentiators among many of DSCR loans is they don't use DTI. They don't look at personal income or even tax returns or anything like that. And instead of using DTI, it's using DSCR, which is the debt service coverage ratio, which measures the rental income from the property over your PITIA, or monthly expense.
yeah. Okay. There are a lot of acronyms there, so let's try to unpeel that a little bit. Okay. So first, I think the key one of the key things to point out is a regular kind of conventional loan. So what we're trying to say there is like that's based on like your work income, for example. So, and that's generally on your on your personal credit report, right? Like the lender, the bank is saying, hey, is Michael a good borrower, right? So that's the conventional side. DTI means debt to income ratio, just again to see how much debt versus income I have. Now, where Robin's the expert on is a DSCR loan, and that DSCR measures the personal or the property. So it's an asset. It's an asset. Per, it's financed by the asset, not the borrower. Is that a right way to think about it, Robin?
Yes, and then one of the things that is was one of the motivations for the book, and I do spend some time on it. Is kind of the misconceptions and the details here. Is there's a lot of terms in real estate and finance that can confuse a lot of people. A lot of terms for the same thing. A lot of different terms that are the same term for different things. So it can definitely get really confusing. Um, Sometimes people think of DSCR loans as asset-based or based only on, how much the property is making. That's a little bit of a misconception in that
Okay.
I really like to say DSCR loans are primarily based on the property, but not totally based on it. So it's going to primarily look at the property, that value of the property and the cash flow it's bringing in. It's also going to look at personal credit score and usually just make sure you have a couple months of liquid assets as a cushion. But other than that, all based on the property. So not all based on the property, primarily based on the property, not your income, not your tax returns, not your whole expenses and lifestyle, just on your credit score and personal background check. But everything other than that based on the property itself.
Gotcha. So just making sure that, you know, the owner of the property is will be a good owner, right? Someone that has a good credit score, has some reserves, so that there's some volatility. Okay, now us through the STR like the best program where we advise clients on buying their first or their next short term rental where the STR tax bill is a big component to that. Um, we're doing a lot of, for at least the first time home buyers, we do a lot of just personal loans, like, they'll, just because probably just not as financially sophisticated. So, maybe just talk to me about like, is this year's like the right kind of first property product financing, or is that something that you look to buy the second, third, fifth one? It would be more appropriate.
Yeah, that's a great question. So DSCR loans are one of the best things about them is they're very flexible. So they can be used for a first-time investor. They can be used for someone who's building a national portfolio and brand of a more institutional like portfolio, and then everything in between. That being said, I like to always think it's kind of that, and this is where it's been really reinforced in my personal experience, buying a few on top of my primary this past year, is 5 to 50 is really kind of that sweet spot for DSCR loan borrowers, where on your first couple you can still probably qualify with conventional loans or with a bank, and that's typically going to be the best way to go. And then over 50, I say, hey, retire, sell your 50
Hmm.
properties and retire and sail away in a yacht. Don't, get a 51st one with a DSCR loan. But really, it's that sweet spot because, I've seen it myself now qualifying with the paperwork that just piles up, and then the conventional lenders will use a lot of haircuts and restrictions, and we want to see 2 years of tax returns
Yeah.
on each STR and if it shows up. So the real sweet spot is kind of when you hit 5, but even if you hit, especially if you're doing short-term rentals and it's more complicated than the long-term rental underwrite, even on your second, third property, it starts to make a lot of sense, especially if you're using the kind of STR loophole type of tax strategy. DSCR loans are LLC friendly, whereas conventional loans, you need to go on your personal taxes, your personal name, your personal credit report. So a lot of people, especially in the short-term rental space, will start seeing the benefits of DSCR loans kind of on that, property, whether that's 5, but even a little earlier, especially if you're doing, STR strategies more than that second, third, fourth type property when you're really building a portfolio or getting systems in place.
Uh, well, that's where I think the SR tax bill would very be very helpful because the well, it may not help you on the debt and income overall, but this will help you on the cash flows, or sorry, the cash side, because you'll be able to take. I presume you did the same, Robin, when you bought 3 this year, right? Was to be able to, or over the last 12 months, was to get that tax benefit back, right? So that you can go buy the next one, and then maybe you're off sides on the debt and income side. The maybe talk a little bit about how folks should think about, maybe let's touch more about the conventional side because I think where a lot of people have questions. You can do maybe talk about second loan versus investment property, and that'd be a good place to start, and then we can move over to the DSCR side because folks, I think everyone understands you buy your home, right? So the primary mortgage is generally pretty low. You generally don't have any debt on that outside of your other stuff, and then maybe talk about like a second home loan, investment loan. Down payment, I think, would be good, and also what type of income can qualify because second home loan and investment loan are going to be treated differently.
Yeah, that's a great question too, and it's a topic I wrote extensively about. It's in the book, and then it's also we can share the links too. It's also published online for free now as well. A very detailed overview of DSCR loans versus second home loans for short-term rentals, and second home loans, vacation home loans, 10% down loans is how a lot of people talk about them, just because I think the main attraction is that low down payment. But if you're really trying to scale, and even if you're really trying to do it correctly, you quickly see when you dive in that these 10% down second home loans are just not intended at all. And the rules are pretty strong against using it for a short-term rental, especially as a cash flowing investment property, especially as one that's primarily used as a short-term rental. Some of the advantages for the DSCR over that second home loan is, the second home loans, their biggest rule is it has to be, they use primarily again in the loan documents, but that means you're not supposed to use it for any more than half the year's 180 days in a year. So it's really hard to get a short-term rental to cash flow if you're already chopping the occupancy to 50% max. So that's a big problem on the second home loan space. You're not allowed to use an LLC on the second home loan. You're not allowed to go past one unit. So a lot of people, especially in kind of high rate, challenging environments, are really doing well with duplexes, triplexes, multiple units. Can't use that on second home loan. Can't use LLC. Can't use a property manager. Where the strategy myself that I went through, and I think a lot of people, especially if you're a high earner with a demanding job, is you want to go through the STR loophole, by the book. You don't want to mess around with the IRS or any of those rules where you're actively participating, but you really just need to be actively participating in the year you're buying it, you're taking the cost set
Exactly.
and then as soon as New Year's rings in the new year, just kind of hand it over to that third party manager that
Well,
knows
you
what.
can't, Robin. Of course, you can't intend to do that, of course. But if it does happen for some reason, I'm joking.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, you do need to, we would say not to do it, January. But if things change, obviously life changes. But the intent should be that you're managing it full time. So actually, just given time, I want to hit on investment because I think the closest corollary to a DSCR is probably the investment loan. So maybe you can just talk about that a little bit, compare and contrast the two.
Yeah, so the DSCR loans, it's one myth maybe a little bit is that it's a little bit higher than rate, but it's really if you put prepayment penalties, again, that's another advantage that you can add some fees to prepay. Again, a lot of these intentions are probably going to be you're holding this for the long haul. And the rates can be equivalent or even very, very competitive with conventional loans. And the DSCR loans just have that flexibility where there's really no rules about you can manage it, you can have a third party manager, you can do it in an LLC. That's usually actually preferred. You can do it with a partnership, and you can, hey, maybe you have a group together, or some people have more capital, some people want to do more of the day-to-day or stuff like that, so you can use that. There's really no geographic restrictions. There's really, no restrictions at all. You're not supposed to occupy it, but generally people think, hey, a couple weeks here or there, 14 days, so you can stay in it, just to get it going and stuff like that. But really, if it's a investment property intended as a true investment property, which I think a lot of short-term rental investors are aiming for, it is, very flexible and kind of a great go-to option.
Got it. And then, so can you do investment loan in LLC?
Yes, so,
Okay.
yeah, it's preferred to be in an LLC by a lot of lenders. There's some states where you can only do it as an LLC, but pretty much every DSCR lender is gonna allow you to use an LLC or partnership model or even trust, as preferred over an individual. And those, as long as you kind of stay, current, that's not gonna show up on your, credit report or anything like that. But that's another good section where I really go over all the details. So, conventional loans supposed to be in your individual's name, and DSCR loans, you can do it in your name in a
Yeah.
lot of states. You can do LLC, a trust, a corporation, a partnership. There's a lot of flexibility on kind of the entity structuring end, which can make a lot of sense once you're scaling too.
So really, to distill this down, then, it's good if you're trying to, you're trying to grow, trying to scale. It's not part of they don't look at your income, or they don't look at your W-2 income per se. If you're looking to start and you want to do a lower down payment, and you're okay with only occupying it for, based on the rules, for not more than 50% of the time, then, you can go to second home loan route. The rate is probably similar, but you get a lower down payment. I think the one other point I'd here too is, like, you can't use the income from that property against your DTI. It's intended as a second home, so there should be generating income from it. And then from from an investment side, probably still a lot of the same restrictions. Fewer of those restrictions, higher down payment. So would DSCR, investment loans are like 20-25%. The last one I did, I actually put 25 down. DSCRs, are they generally 20 or 25 generally?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally there's some DSCR lenders that will do kind of just 15% down, the 85 LTV. Mostly, especially on the short-term rental stuff, you'll see 80% for a acquisition loan. So 20% down is pretty standard at this point. It's with a little research, you should be able to find 20% down options to purchase short-term rentals for sure.
Got it. Okay. And then, so, like, for the folks who's the ideal kind of candidate for on the STR side? So you mentioned that in the beginning. So is that someone, their second or third property, maybe they're looking to, diversify risk a little bit, get other additional capital come in that is just financial capital while they do more of the work, and then they have a little more flexibility? Like, maybe just give some, like, what are like one or two ideal candidates for DSCR loan for STRs?
Yeah, I mean, I think DSCR loans are flexible, like we've talked about. I think you'll see, doing a lot of these mortgages, dealing with the paperwork. And if you're a high earner and a high, dealing with managing an STR, it's a lot. It gets a lot, very quickly. So someone who's looking to put the capital to use, they know what they're doing. They've done it. They've kind of maxed out for whatever reason in terms of maybe they have a couple, 2 or 3, and it's, they have to wait. They would have to wait for another year to get tax returns to show the income from this other property, or their DTI is getting challenged because the lender is asking for all of these accounts and all that stuff. And then they're getting their second, third, fourth, and they want it. I think importantly too is the LLC type. It takes some research, but there's a lot of, it's a lot of that point as well too. When you have a couple, 2 or 3, you're adding to your portfolio, and you're building your net worth. Maybe when you're, just starting out, or you're investing in STRs on the side. Okay, it might not make sense to have a whole LLC for, a different LLC for all your properties. But if you're a high earner and you've started putting stuff away in the bank and you have a few million net worth, then all of a sudden when you're investing in LLCs, it's investing in STRs, it probably starts to make sense to hey, I want to put these in different LLCs. I want to spend the, $500 a pop and, protect my liability from, having guests, all over the place. So,
Yeah.
I think someone who's hitting that kind of third, fourth, fifth property. I think if you want to start investing with a group, maybe the LLC stuff is very important. And then moving quickly in terms of if you're someone who says, okay, I'm starting to really understand this specific market. Maybe now I have 3 or 4 for me in Austin, and it's ready to kind of scale and move quickly because now you have your cleaners dialed in, you have your pricing engine dialed in, you have your systems. Then as soon as you have your systems and you hit that scale where it starts to make sense to do that all at once, then it starts to make sense to start scaling quicker, rather than looking at everything as kind of an individual project. So I could go on, but DSCR loans can be a great fit for lots of different people. So it's hard to kind of come up with a, that specific of a persona since there's a wide range of people they're very helpful for.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. I think the other part on, and just to pull out that point about, if you already have a, substantial net worth and, you want to just on the asset protection side be able to, give yourself that extra layer there. I think that's actually really helpful. Hey, Robin, so as we wrap the conversation here, tell us about when you wrote the book. I mean, you took a year off. Most people kind of go on vacation, play golf, play tennis. You decided to write a book. How was that process? And repeat the name of the book again so folks know where to look for it.
The book is the book on DSCR loans, so pretty simple.
By Robin Simon. All right,
By
everyone
Robin.
go on. Everyone, it'll be in the show notes. Buy a copy. Go on Amazon. I'm sure it's there.
I took that process. It was like, I've been in the industry for a while, but when you're running a company and doing loans, and it's a lot of work. And then buying a lot of STRs, as probably your audience knows, it's a lot of work too. So it definitely stayed busy for sure. It's interesting. It's also some time to just kind of explore these kind of AI tools out there, and really a little bit of it definitely helped seeing kind of ChatGPT and some of these other tools. But one thing I did learn is that they're not perfect and they can't do all the work for you. So it is, a lot of it is AI assisted, but I learned there's no substitute for actually writing it and rereading it and editing it yourself. So that's pretty quality. But I think it was it's very long, but I think there's a lot of good information that's now out there that has previously been just kind of gate kept. And hey, if you have questions or have questions, want to see how it works on the lending side, you were kind of beholden to asking a loan officer or making some calls. And now the big thing is, hey, there's no real reason for all this information to kind of be kept away. It's it should be kind of delivered to people's fingertips to do your own research, which I think is going to be very helpful for a lot of people. But it took a little time. I think the AI stuff was a little bit of a false hope, and you have to kind of go and make sure it's all right instead of trusting it. But it was a good experience. But I'm glad it's finally published and out there.
No, congratulations, Robin. I know it was a ton of work, and I appreciate you spending time here today and talking about the book, talking about, DSCR loans and educating the audience. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Robin.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Okay, perfect.